Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's Jobtrain How Talent session. I'm Giles, Director of Strategic Development here at Jobtrain, and I am delighted to be joined by Emma Mirrington, who will introduce herself in just a second. So pleased that so many of you could join us for this morning's session. A bit of housekeeping. The first things first, can I just check that everybody can see and hear Emma and I okay? And then we will crack on.
Hi everyone, I'll just say a quick hello to make sure you can hear me too.
Excellent, we're all good. We are live this morning on Crowdcast, and we are also live on LinkedIn as well. So hello to anybody that's watching and joining us on LinkedIn. This morning's session will be about an hour in terms of bits of housekeeping and stuff. It is an interactive session as well, especially for those of you that are joining us on Crowdcast. So if you have any questions or comments or anything during the session, feel free to stick those in the chat, which you will find a little icon for just on the right-hand side of your screen. And this morning, we also have 2 polls, and we'd really like your responses and feedback in those polls. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a little graph bit. If you click on that, it'll open up the poll section. Please do add your responses into those polls. It'd be really helpful just to get a bit of feedback for you. There's 2 polls. First is, which sector has the highest hiring momentum right now? So that's almost like your perception, or you may actually know that it's your sector, or may know about another one. And the second one is, what is your top priority for 2026? So we've got a whole range of them in there, from candidate experience to data to ED&I, onboarding, talent pooling, workforce planning, a whole bunch of stuff in there. So please do get involved, do add your responses into the polls, and we'll revisit that one in a short while. So for this morning's session, really delighted to be joined by Emma. We're going to cover a whole bunch of stuff, but ultimately we're going to be talking about from insights to impact and the main trends that are shaping TA in 2026, but also beyond into 27 and 28. So the things we're going to cover today are candidate experience gap. This is something that is actually quite recent and quite current, but we'll come on to that in a little while. AI in practice, such a hot topic at the moment, not just the hype, but also how TA teams today are actually implementing it effectively. Skills and mindset that your teams need to succeed in today's market. We know it's a challenging one right now. And let's get cracking. So without any further ado, now that we know everybody's joined us and we are live, everybody can see and hear us. Emma, I'm so pleased you could join us this morning. Would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Thank you, Giles. And yes, we'd love to. Giles and I were just saying, actually, it feels really funny. We're on sort of the opposite sides of the fence, because normally it's me facilitating and introducing Giles for his session. So it feels funny being the other side of the fence, but lovely to see you all, everyone. So my name is Emma Mirrington. I'm CEO of the Talent Labs. And my background is talent acquisition. So prior to setting up the business, I worked for organisations such as Unilever, Sky, most recently was head of talent at Mars. And now, obviously, my focus is on the Talent Labs full time. So let's share the slides and let's get cracking. I've got so much to share with you today. So hopefully it will be a sort of a whistle-stop tour in terms of what's happening in the world of talent acquisition. And in terms of the session itself, what I like to do is just first of all start off with some of the sort of macro trends that we're seeing across the world. Then what does that mean from a business perspective? What does that then mean from a business leader, from an HR perspective? I pull on research from the likes of Gartner, LinkedIn, etc. And then we delve into what does this actually mean for talent and talent teams using our own research. So hopefully you will find it useful. We will give you access to the slides afterwards, because I'm conscious there's an awful lot of sort of data and information that we're going to go through. So let's crack on with the slides. And if we could move to the next slide, please. I think this is going to have sort of COVID implications when I say next slide, please. So first of all, a little bit about the Talent Labs. So we are a membership training consultancy business for the talent community. So if you're not a member, then we will be offering people a discount at the end of the presentation. So in order for you to join and sign up. But from a practitioner point of view, it's everything you could possibly need in your day-to-day talent and recruiting life. So whether that's an online resource library where you can download templates and toolkits, whether it's our online community where you can just access insight and information from other recruiters, or indeed sort of our online events, etc. We've got our awards coming up in a couple of weeks, which Jobtrain are our headline sponsor for. Thank you so much, Giles. And really looking forward to celebrating with so many of you there. So enough about us, but let's look at the world of talent acquisition. So on the next slide, you'll sort of see these 4 blocks. And what's really interesting is I deliver this sort of presentation quite a lot. And it's really, it doesn't really change that much from sort of month to month. And then I was doing this this year and I'm like, oh my goodness, I am literally having to change this every week because there is just so much going on. So whether it's sort of changes that we've seen, so things like the rise of job hugging and great stay, that's moved, and we're now seeing it's not just quiet quitting, but quiet cracking. So I'm going to come on to that a little bit later on. We're seeing a lot of changes, aren't we, from a sort of legislation perspective. So whether in the UK, that's our Employment Rights Bill, whether it's the EU Pay Transparency Directive, that's really sort of impacting on a lot of us in 2026. Interestingly as well, we're seeing many employers still struggling to find the skilled talent that they need. So Manpower's World and the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report said that 74 to 76% of you are still expecting not to find the skilled talent that they need. Wow. And I know it's crazy, isn't it? And this is despite sort of the huge rise of candidate applications that we're seeing that I'll show you sort of a little bit more detail later on.
Because the ONS statistics just came out yesterday that shows that obviously unemployment has risen yet again and vacancy levels have decreased yet again as well. So you just never would have thought that.
And it is crazy, isn't it? Because I had a workshop yesterday, which was around with a group of members looking at and their roles as sort of proactive sourcing. And they were all saying that, you know, skill sets like engineering, etc., they're still really struggling to find the right quality of candidates. So despite everything, some of the challenges don't change, but we have some others to deal with. The other thing that we're really seeing sort of impact on young people. So in the UK, the not in employment, educational training it's traditionally been around sort of 900,000 since early 2024, but it's reached an 11-year high of 987,000 earlier this year. So that means that 1 in 8 of young people between 16 and 24 are actually out of work. And the number of young people claiming universal credit has risen by more than 50% in the last 5 years. And even more interesting, 80% of those are claiming for a mental health or neurodevelopmental condition, which is something that has really sort of changed over the last few years. And I was reading a piece of research by High Flyers around the graduate market report, and it said that with the UK top employers, they've cut their graduate intake by 14.6% last year. So that's an 8-year low. So lots and lots of change. If we move on to the next slide, this is hot off the press. So Insights, I attended last Thursday, LinkedIn Talent Edge presentation where their chief economist revealed some of the sort of statistics. And so this really is just sort of showing the GDP percentage growth forecast. So for those of you that are not familiar with the GDP, it's basically a way of measuring the size and health of a country's economy. So in the sort of the simplest way, it's the total value of all goods and services that a country produces, normally over a year. So with the stats that you can see in front of you, those in red are figures that are down from last year, and those that are green are up from last year. Now, according to LinkedIn, anything above 2.4 is actually good. So overall, the world isn't in a bad place. However, you can see that it's really varied across different countries. So China is 4.7%, showing sort of good growth. India, 6.2%. It's not the same necessarily elsewhere. So interesting for you to see. So if we move on to the next slide, so what does this mean sort of for business leaders? What are the top priorities for business leaders in 2026? So Gartner produced this piece of research where they survey around 1,500 CEOs globally, and they ask them what their top priorities are for the following couple of years. So unsurprisingly, and I don't know any CEO that doesn't say growth, growth is the top priority. But what is interesting is that how workforce has shifted as a sort of strategic business priority over the last few years. So only 20% of the surveyed CEOs actually ranked workforce as one of their top 3 strategic priorities for 25 and 26. And this has changed from 2022, when over 31% said that it was a top priority. I think another interesting insight coming out of this particular piece of research was around the CEO confidence index, which is currently only sitting at 49%, and are sort of coming to the reasons why CEOs are not feeling confident about their opportunities in 2026. So as we move on to the next slide, Akins has coined, so Robert Akins, who's sort of the chief research officer at Gartner, he's coined a phrase which is the wicked mess. And he said there are 3 wicked messes for CEOs to deal with in 2026 and 27. And this is drawn from the wicked problems of the 1970s. And it really reflects a moment in time when politics, technology, and business intersect. So they are normally really complex social planning issues. There's no clear definition or solution or stopping point, and they're all really unique, interconnected, and difficult to test. And no matter what solution that you go for, it has lasting consequences. And Akins was saying that today's uncertainty really surpasses the financial crisis, Brexit, the pandemic combined. And so how are CEOs actually dealing with this? Well, they're looking to rework their global operations. He said that more than half expect US policy to impact on their supply chains. Many of them are redesigning them as a result. And over 45% of CEOs plan to raise prices above the normal rates. 77% are actually pursuing efficiency measures. So if we move on to the next slide, you'll see that the second point is really sort of highlighted here. So the second mess is around the AI value conundrum. So 79% of CEOs see AI, unsurprisingly, as the biggest disruptor to their industries. But what is interesting here is that technology leadership is really in flux. So Akins said that many CEOs have actually pulled AI projects into their own offices. So they felt that progress lagged under the direction of other business leaders, but they still expected their C-suite to take the lead. Interestingly, only 7% of CEOs said that their CHROs have enough AI savviness. This was according to another KPMG report. But even more worryingly, 44% said the same about their CIOs. So there is a real sort of lack of confidence within the AI capability of their organizations, whether that's technology or whether it's HR, which perhaps links back to the confidence index that we saw on a previous slide. So if we move to the next slide, you'll see that the third wicked mess is about the workforce itself. So CEOs continue to want organizational resilience, but they are investing less in people and culture. So, and a report by KPMG showed that nearly 1 in 5 CEOs reported reducing those investments, which is more than double the figure from last year. And how are they managing this? Well, the majority of organizations are quietly managing attrition. And one of the questions that Akins really sort of suggested is the bet is that AI can become the new workforce. Probably yes, but not right now. So we'll see the impact of that on HR shortly. AI adoption has really sort of had a cumulative effect on what companies are at their core. So as we know, it's really changing how we work, who we are as an organization, changing the values, how we interact with other people. But people are still essential to AI adoption because obviously they're the ones who develop the use cases, redesign the processes, drive organizational change. So from an HR perspective, it's how can we help CEOs manage these wicked messes? So whether it's through guiding workforce strategy, is it around clarifying talent costs, and really sort of building that AI literacy across leadership, across culture. So Aikens really sort of feels that this is a fantastic moment for HR. And he also said, and you're absolutely ready for it. But are we? So if we move on to the next slide, so that's sort of very much sort of a business perspective. Now let's have a look at what this means for HR. So on the next slide, you'll see another piece of research from Gartner. So we've got the top 4 priorities for 2026 and beyond. So the first piece, obviously, is around harnessing AI. So HROs need a clear HR AI strategy because AI is going to reshape our roles, our processes, our operating models. So leaders have got to be ready to redesign how that work gets done. And so planning for sort of the human AI workforce, Aikens again was saying that CHROs really need a now and next plan. So how do we get the best from the talent of today whilst also preparing for new ways of working over the next few years? So it's really important as well that we build leaders who can handle constant change. So implementing it, changing is continuous, isn't it? So HR really needs to be able to help leaders guide their teams through it, focus on steady progress, manage reactions, and really sort of start to build in those everyday change skills. Speaking of changing, so when we move on to the next slide, you'll just see how organisation shapes are changing. And I thought this was absolutely fascinating. And Anna, my business partner, always teases me because I start doing like this sort of through the window type shape with my. This sort of reminds you of those of you who replay school days when you start looking around the window. So the old shape of organisation traditionally has very much been sort of your pyramid, hasn't it? So lots of more junior, entry level roles at the bottom of the organisation, less levels at the top. What we're really seeing now is the shift to more of a diamond-shaped organisation. So fewer layers at the top and bottom, but a much larger and a much more influential management layer in the middle. So managers really now becoming central to culture and communication. There is a much more focus on self-service. So that also means their capability is hugely important. And this is also sort of concerning for many of us when we think about the amount of legislation coming through. So whether, again, that's sort of, the day one rights, etc., the importance of hiring decisions. So we are seeing, from a Talent Labs perspective, a huge influx in the number of queries for hiring manager training. We do a lot of it, particularly around things like inclusive hiring or interview skills, etc. So I think that we will still continue to see more of that and a really big focus on hiring manager and people manager capability.
That's really interesting. I'll mention this a bit later on, but we work very closely with Emma and Anna and the team over at Talent Labs, and we recently facilitated a lot of round table discussions with 100 TA leaders, essentially. And we're looking specifically at the main challenges around candidate experience. And there's quite a number of those. If you click on the link at the bottom of here, perhaps at the end of the session, you'll see what that is. But hiring manager, engagement, control, all the consistency around employer brand messaging, all the rest of it was one of the biggest problems. I think it was the third largest problems that they all cited. So the challenge is obvious in terms of you've got so many middle management. How do we engage them, inform them, train them, increase their capability, I guess?
So true, Giles. And in the session I had yesterday, again, we were talking about the importance of hiring managers in sort of the attraction side of things as well. But sometimes it's just like herding cats because they brilliant. So let's move on to the next slide. So now what we're going to have a look at is what does this actually mean for talent and recruitment itself. So again, if we move on. So I touched on before we talked about quiet cracking. So here we're just going to explore the external global talent environment. I haven't got time to go through every single item here. And some of these things you'll be very familiar with, some of them not so much. And this was a really brilliant piece of research actually by Robert Walters. Highly recommend you downloading it just because it's a really easy read. And I think I'll start off at the top. So really with the quiet cracking. So I was like, oh, crikey, what's that? I've not heard that before. So over the past 2 years, it's really becoming one of the clearest indicators of employee strain. So it's not like quiet quitting. So quiet quitting is a deliberate choice to do the bare minimum at work. But quiet cracking is where the employee continues to show up, but really sort of struggling internally under the weight of the pressure, job uncertainty, stalled professional growth. So that, the job uncertainty, it may be around sort of concerns, is AI going to take my job? It may be around economic concerns. We've all seen on to the previous slides around sort of the current state of sort of the economy. And so this can often be seen as a slow and silent decline in well-being and performance. So it might be triggered by poor leadership, unclear expectations, or just unmanageable workloads and fear of job loss. One of the themes that we have seen that people talk about a lot is doing more with less, and that clearly then has an impact from a sort of stress management perspective. So it also touches here on the engagement recession. Well, what is that? Well, in 2026, this is what happens when you have the individual experience of quiet cracking, when that actually accumulates across teams and departments. So it really starts to lead to a negative shift in productivity and culture. So that's a sort of a trend that we're starting to see in 2026 and will probably continue into 2027. And it also sort of reflects back to sort of a previous slide where I just showed sort of the amount of people accessing universal credit in the UK for sort of some of the neurological conditions, mental health, etc. So it's a trend that unfortunately I think we will see continue to increase. Wanted to touch a little bit on succession planning. So it is a core focus for many of our members, actually. It's something that not many organisations do well. Succession planning, workforce planning can be still an ongoing challenge. But what we are seeing is that the companies who are outperforming their peers are really treating succession planning as sort of as a continuous discipline, not just a crisis response. So that really sort of helps when you've got leaders who are accountable for developing their successors. It really sort of develops resilience across the entire organisation. Emotional intelligence. This was an interesting insight that came out of this research. So it said emotional intelligence, EQ, is really emerging as sort of the really number one defining human skill for success. So it's for those of you that are not familiar with EQ, it's comprised of 5 kind of interconnected components. So whether that's self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, relationship management, and motivation. And so that's something that many people looking for success in 2026, I think sort of really focusing on EQ could be quite pivotal here. The other area that I thought would be interesting to highlight is career cushioning. So I'm not sure if you are familiar with that expression. I hadn't heard of it before, but it's the process of strengthening your career options to soften the blow if your job situation changes. So in 2026, apparently it's become a mainstream strategy. So rather than waiting for change to happen, employees are kind of building a really proactive career safety net, for want of a better word. So whether it's updating their CVs, expanding their networks, improving their LinkedIn profile, strengthening skills, or just kind of keeping an eye on the job market. Apparently 68% of workers are engaged in some sort of career cushioning activity. And what I was really surprised at is that 85% of professionals are considering a career move in 26 that took part in this survey. So I was like, wow, that is a lot.
It's a huge amount. And actually, it's weird because it flies in the face of the data that we have within our own Talent Insights report, which suggests that given the economic climate, a lot of people are actually just digging in and planning to stick where they are rather than risk moving.
So interesting, isn't it? I wonder what they mean when they say considering. Maybe it's just a sort of. Maybe
I know, I saw that.
Considering
a career move. Yeah,
and maybe the career cushioning is interesting. So maybe even if people are thinking, well, I won't actually move, but I'm still going to really focus on ensuring that I'm ready for a career move should it happen.
Getting that CV out on a job board, or maybe contacting a couple of recruiters, and almost like a bit of a safety net.
Yeah. And then finally, sort of the multi-generational workforce. I mean, I know many people who are dealing with this at the moment, but we now have workforces that span 5 generations. We all have different economic, technological, and cultural eras, and we're all sort of coming together. So that in itself provides some interesting challenges. But there is huge amounts of research on that externally. So haven't really sort of dug into lots of detail there.
Well.
If we move on to the next slide. So again, this is sort of hot off the press from LinkedIn. So this is really interesting. So LinkedIn data is really sort of showing economic uncertainty and monetary policy shifts are the main drivers. You can see here that advanced economies are really struggling the most. So hiring is down about 20 to 35% compared to pre-pandemic levels. The LinkedIn hiring rate, for those of you that are not familiar with that is just the number of LinkedIn members who added a new employer to their profile in the same month the job began. So divided by the total number of LinkedIn members in that country. It does say it on here, but hopefully you can read that okay. So what we'll do now is we'll just come on to the first poll. And I will pass to you in a minute, Giles. I'll just sort of explain. Ready to go. So LinkedIn have produced a piece of research which shows which sector has the largest hiring momentum. So I thought, let's just see if you can sort of get a feel for what you think that should be. So you've got a list in front of you, and Giles, I'll pass to you now.
Yeah, that's fine. A few of you got involved. It'd be great if a few more of you could just jump in now. We might see some of these numbers tick up a little bit, but there seem to be a couple of clear areas here. Hospitals and healthcare, about 36%, and professional services are higher at 45%. Mm-hmm. So yeah, some clear standout. Financial services in there, but not so much. They seem to be the two areas that are being strongly indicated here.
Okay, fab. So if we move on to the next slide.
Yeah, and that was, what is your top priority for 2026? Sorry.
It should be the global labour markets.
Yeah, this is me just jumping on my polls. I'm just getting ahead of myself, Emma. Just ignore me. You carry on, and I'll just sit quietly.
No worries. So on your screen in front of you, you should see the global labour market showing low hiring momentum. So what you can see here is, so hospitals and healthcare, unsurprisingly, so this does actually match what you said. That's the sort of the number one sort of sector that is still growing. Well, in fact, there's only 3 that are experiencing growth in 2026. So number one, hospitals and healthcare, sitting at 18%, but that's followed by education and consumer services. So interestingly as well, oil, gas and mining, minus 45%. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Also interesting to see the growth from a sort of regional perspective as well. So we've got India, Brazil sitting here. I did think, why is China not showing growth here? But of course, China doesn't have LinkedIn, so it doesn't feature on this particular chart. I did do some separate digging around China, and apparently in 2025, they created 12.67 million new urban jobs, so which was above its government target of 12 million. So really, really interesting. So that's why obviously China is not featuring here. But again, this is based, so with the stats you can see here, this is sort of based on the LinkedIn hiring rate. So it's quite a good stat actually, just in terms of it showing, it sort of shows sort of like a barometer check, health check of a country in terms of whether there are sort of the market is tougher at the moment, or a company's slowing recruitment, or indeed businesses are recruiting more and more people are getting hired. So LinkedIn uses job changes that people update on their profiles just to track these trends over time. So interesting one to have a look at. Cool. So let's move on to the next slide. And actually, one of the things that might be quite useful to you, I don't know if you're familiar with the economic graph for LinkedIn, but if you want to have access to this data real time, I think Vicky or a member of the team, if you just pop it in the chat for everyone can access this themselves. So here we can just see how the job market is changing over time. So we can really get a feel for, job seekers are really outpacing job openings. And this is still this links back to our conversation before, Giles, where we're saying, that still people are struggling with scarcity of the right quality talent for particular sectors. So it's still not an easy. You'd think we'd be laughing with sort of having our pick and choice of every sort of candidate we need, but it's just not the case. And because of the rise of things like AI-enabled candidates, I was speaking to somebody in the NHS the other day, and they said that a technical role that they were recruiting for, in the past, they would maybe get sort of 8 to 10 applications. It was that technical, and now they're getting 300. So, and then just imagine that multiplied by how many vacancies that they're actually managing, and that sort of brings its own sort of challenges itself, doesn't it? So if we move,
it's a huge problem at the moment. There's a rise in candidates using AI as part of their application, and for anybody here that's experiencing it, there's a couple of ways you can combat it really easily. And one of those big ones, especially I'm going to talk to public sector here, is remove those big text boxes, remove those covering letters and that kind of thing, because it's so easy for a candidate to simply copy and paste. You end up getting sort of carbon copy responses and stuff. But start using assessment questions a little bit more. They really do reduce the number of applications you have to go through.
Thank you, Giles. Top tip.
Top tip.
So you'll see. So speaking of AI, as we move on to the next slide, again, this is from LinkedIn's economic graph. So they're calling it AI is creating a new collar era. So in the US, jobs requiring AI literary skills like prompt engineering grew 70% year over year. And this is really sort of transforming the types of jobs that professionals want too. We're also seeing trades careers drawing more interest. And over the past 2 years, you'll see here 1.3 million new AI-enabled jobs have emerged globally. But AI adoption is still quite slow. Skills remain quite concentrated to just a few job functions. However, LinkedIn is saying that the roles are really very much giving rise to a new collar era. So it's an emerging workforce that really sort of blends knowledge work, advanced technical skills, but also distinctly human strengths too.
That does not surprise me at all. I'm just going all personal here, but my daughter finishes her finals tomorrow, and she's taking a year out. And we were talking about her, her career move or her first role, and she said, "It's fine, Dad." She said, "The roles that I'm applying for will be created in about 6 months' time." She's so specific. She knows the role that she's going to apply for, but it hasn't actually yet been created. But it will be 6 months. So it's just a personal indication of the exponential increase and rise in these new skills. And it's interesting that you call it a new collar era, but it rings true for sure.
So let's move on to the next slide, and then just want answers in the chat, really, everyone. So what do you think? And again, this is according to LinkedIn, where they sort of map skills, map skills on people's profiles. What is the number one skill on the rise in the UK on LinkedIn? What do you think it is? And it's not what you think it is.
So, get involved. Stick your responses in the chat. Let's see. Is anybody out there?
What do you think it is, Giles? Have you seen the full presentation?
Alex has chimed in here. No, I haven't seen it actually. Alex says here prompt engineering for AI. I think that's a pretty good shout.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll put...
Andy, EI.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. And that was actually something that you alluded to earlier, Emma, actually.
Yep. With the emotional intelligence.
Data automation.
Well, let's
automation using AI, backend, data analysis, data science. There's certainly a correlation there, isn't there?
Fab. Let's put people out of their misery and let's move on to the next slide. So it's relationship building. Number one.
So Andy, you get that one. Congratulations. And Richard too.
Brilliant. So yes, relationship building, which I guess is sort of when we really sort of think about the importance of that human intervention, human connection, still really, really important. I wondered if it might be around sort of decision making, but you've got sort of strategic thinking in here too. AI literacy, unsurprising, because I thought it would be around AI literacy or even sort of the LLM utilization. But isn't it interesting, sort of adaptability market analysis? But yeah, I was surprised that it was relationship building, but perhaps unsurprising when we look at what we've sort of seen so far.
Emma, do you think that that could be a symptom of the world in which we've arrived at today? And I'm thinking back to, we had this bizarre period of time which now feels like a bit of a bad dream, which was COVID, where we lost that sense of human connection. In fact, we weren't even allowed it. It was, it wasn't allowed in terms of connecting with one another physically or in any meaningful way. Then we're all a bit scared of doing that afterwards because we'd have been told that we couldn't. And then we got into this new world of conducting, if we look at it from a business perspective, conducting a lot of our business lives using Teams and Zoom and all the rest of it. And a lot of that stayed. And yes, it gives us an awful lot. But I think a lot of us still crave meaningful human connection, but we're not getting it. And certainly one of the things that came out when I did the Collaborate event with you in London was, had all these 100 TA people come together, and he just said, it's just so good to come together physically, not a Zoom call, not in Teams, but physically, and talk about our current experiences, our challenges, suddenly realize that we're not the only ones. That sense of community and creating relationships in the traditional way is still really important.
So important, I think. And as our strength as humans is being human. So if we can use AI to help us be more efficient, more productive, but that the sort of the community, the people, the decision making, the relationship building, communication is still so important, and more so than ever. So if we move on to now talent, so we'll just have a look at our annual report. So we can pop a link to this in the chat as well. But this is a report that we do annually, unsurprisingly. So we just explore like the key sort of trends, insights amongst our community, just sort of what's keeping people awake at night, what tools are they using, how are they measuring success. It's a big meaty beast of a document. I think there's about 70 odd pages. But it is definitely well worth a read. Really interesting in terms of benchmarking yourself against other organisations too. So let's have a quick look. We'll go on to the next slide. So we'll have a look at the poll and see if that measures up to our priorities in the annual report. So Giles, I'll pass to you.
Right, let's bring it up. So what is your top priority? There's a really clear winner here with 40% of the vote. It's AI and automation. Candidate experience is just 6%. EVP and employer brands got quite a lot of significance, actually 13%. And workforce planning, which is, I guess, linked to succession planning, which is something that you alluded to before, Emma, and the screening selections, just 20%. Yeah. I can hazard a guess as to why screening selections in there, but interesting stats. Actually, just before we come on to your next part, Sarah Jane's made a really good point there. Thanks, Sarah Jane. I think home working's contributed to the absence of meaningful human connection, I'm going to call it. Whilst it offers great flexibility, people really miss that, physical connection, in-person connection, and relationship building. I can only speak personally. I do a bit of both, but I'm pretty much in the office every day when I don't have to, off-site meetings and stuff. And I personally love being around my colleagues, in a physical sense rather than just on Teams meetings and stuff. And I think inherently as human beings, as a human race, we're inherently tribal rather than being, solitary people. So, I think we get an awful lot from that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. We are about to launch our salary and rewards survey, which is one of our most popular pieces of research. Can't think why. Talent teams all want to know what everybody else is being paid. But we also, within that, we look at sort of working patterns. The last time we did it was just after COVID. So it'd be really interesting to see what sort of typical working patterns are for talent teams now, and what it is that people are actually looking for, what's optimal for them. Cool. So if we just move on to the next slide, so you can actually see what our survey in our survey. So this is sort of the top priorities. So Unsurprisingly, automation and AI has jumped to the top spot. Last year it was candidate experience, but to be honest, candidate experience, EVP employer brand have always been in the top 3. Data and metrics, you see, is also a popular one. I think what is really interesting is what is not in the top priorities here. So previously, ED&I has always been a top 3 priority, probably for the last 10 years of the research. But this year, there's been a dramatic change. So it's fallen from say 35%, I think, of people last year were saying it's priority, to less than 10%. Although ED&I practices are still continuing to mature. So, for example, 47% of respondents are actually disability confident employers, and it was 35% last year. So for me, it's really interesting. Has it been deprioritized? It's not necessarily been devalued. Is it because this is now more business as usual? I will say that this seems to be more private sector organisations. I think a lot of the public sector organisations that I'm speaking to still do have a key focus on ED&I. I think with the organisations as well, ED&I people may not have sort of the same targets in place that they've had previously. It's definitely seemed to it definitely seems to sort of change. So I think that for me was sort of one of the standout surprises in the priority list this year. If we move to the next slide, so across the entire report, we've got some key sub-themes that I'll just sort of work through. So, and how this has changed from last year as we move into 2027 as well. So AI has really moved from emerging to essential. So last year, I've got a little bit of repeating. Last year we saw some early experimentation, uneven adoption. Now we're seeing it's much more of a formal priority, absolutely an efficiency driver, but people are still progressing with caution. And I think we've seen that with our events as well. We had with Collaborate a couple of weeks ago, we had a roundtable discussion around how people are implementing AI within their organisations, and it's still absolutely sort of progressing with caution. I've touched on before that ED&I sort of fell from being a top 3 priority. Workforce planning has absolutely jumped up the agenda. So last year it was very much seen as sort of recognised but inconsistent. And 2026 and 2027 is really sort of seen as essential. Perhaps that's because of the external uncertainty that we're dealing with at the moment, people continually having to reforecast. We're seeing a real increase in cost-saving recruitment channels, so much more of a shift towards talent pooling, relaunching, refreshing of referral schemes, people really sort of looking to reduce their agency spend. I've seen quite a few projects recently with people reviewing PSLs, etc. And we're seeing outsourcing returning as a really sort of flexible capacity lever. So it wasn't really a major theme in 2025, but we're really seeing it become so in 2026 due to the capacity pressure. We're
so
still
this might be
seeing
sort of simple scale-up RPO type solutions and things like that, Emma.
Yeah, and people just being able to turn the tap on and off. So rather than having sort of the fixed, headcount within the talent teams, so we are seeing talent teams remaining lean. So 66% of respondents have fewer than 10 people in their team, and only 22% expected their headcount to grow this year.
Wow.
So on the next slide, you'll see a sort of talent trends 26. So I actually popped the report into ChatGPT and said, can you just tell me what the trend is? So last year, the trend was sort of doing more with less for talent teams, and ChatGPT said, it's just doing even more with even less. I was like, well, that's not particularly creative. Can you think of something else, please? So one of sort of the key insights that it then shared was about recruiters moving from being reactive order takers to proactive business partners. And that is absolutely something that we're seeing across all talent teams in terms of the training that we provide, in terms of the in focus sort of team development sessions that people access as part of membership, business partnering, stakeholder management, influencing, effective communications, really, really sort of important for many talent teams. And you can see here that just sort of across the board, workloads continuing to climb. that budgets are still tightening. So 58% fill fewer than 10% of their roles through agencies, which is up from last year. And an impressive 6% of organisations spend under £100 per hire. So well done, teams, for that. That's impressive. Mainly volume recruitment, everybody, I will say. We are seeing capability gaps widening, people worried about their hiring manager capability, which I've touched on previously. And particularly skills like selection and assessment, ED&I, so inclusive hiring, biggest areas of concern, particularly, again, I think this is influenced by, the employment legislation rights coming through. It's really important to get our selection decisions right. I was surprised that assessment selection wasn't higher on the priority list this year. I think it will be next year.
And maybe it's a bit of a lag there, Emma. Across our client base, we're seeing a renewed focus on it, for sure. And it's certainly something from a product perspective, we're putting an awful lot of time and effort into. And a big part of that is using AI responsibly to automatically generate scored assessment questions for candidate applications. So rather than also scoring candidate applications, which is fraught with challenge, it really is, and also some danger as well. We're going to be automatically generating assessment questions for candidates to complete that generate scores. So it reduces the number of time spent on candidate applications, but introduces an element of assessment, which I think reduces the noise quite a lot, but also a bit more confidence around sort of applying the 80-20 principle of focusing 80% of your time on the top 20% of candidates or applicants.
Brilliant. Yes, super helpful. Thanks, Giles. And then the last point on here was sort of around entry-level talent pipeline shrinking. So again, sort of this reflects just what we've seen on an earlier slide about sort of impact on early careers programs and talent. So if we move on, so 9 challenges ahead for talent teams. So we, as part of the survey, there is a free text box, and the question is quite simply, what's keeping you awake at night from a talent perspective? What's worrying you? And these are sort of the 9 boxes. So I won't delve into each of these right now. This will just sort of give you a bit of a flavour. But everything from sort of scarcity of talent. I know that sort of engineering technical talent is still an issue for many people. The external pressures allude to the external environments that we're operating in. Clearly a focus for many around sort of workforce planning. And also the whole sort of retention, engagement, onboarding piece. In fact, we are just doing a piece of research at the moment around sort of the impact of AI in attraction onboarding. So we'd love you to take part in that. We can send that link out to you afterwards too. So what does all of this mean for you and your teams? So if we move on to the next slide, and then we'll skip to the next one. So how your role is changing. So you should see 2 circles in front of you. Are any of you familiar with the traditional sort of 6B framework? Giles, is this something you've come across before?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So on the left-hand side is sort of the traditional framework. And what we're really seeing now is the advent of bot. So instead of just advising on the how to hire, which is the buy option, many recruitment and talent teams are now expected to advise across all talent strategies. So whether it's to hire at all, whether you need to redesign the organisation, is it sort of contractor versus FTE versus temp versus outsourced provider? Do we need to look at internal mobility? Can we move or retrain somebody that we already have? Do we need to sort of take it to the next level down, which is around role decomposition? So is it around sort of breaking the job into tasks, determining what can be automated? Or let's actually do a task analysis. So with the AI investment, which tasks actually should still be done by humans, which should still be done by bots? So I think sort of a competence for all talent teams in sort of building that sort of capability and competence across the entire talent life cycle is really, really, really important. And it's something that we are starting to see in many organisations where talent teams used to very much focus on sort of the external hire buy side of things. Really now they're sort of advising across all aspects of the talent life cycle. So if we have a look nearly at the close now, so top skills for you in 2026, I should say, and beyond. But really, so number one, human AI collaboration skills. I think, when we think back to the very beginning of the presentation and the CEO confidence in their HR team's ability to use AI effectively, we need to build that confidence. So you need to be all over AI if you're not already, and not just sort of using ChatGPT, Claude for sort of interface, but sort of agentic AI. You need to be able to build your agents to support you with your day-to-day recruiting life. So I would say that's number one skill. For those of you that are involved in more sort of talent learning type roles, then really it's around sort of designing the pathways that can be powered by data. We've actually got a fab workshop coming up around the use of Power BI. One of our members created an amazing sort of dashboard themselves, and then how they sort of made decisions associated with that. So it would be a great one for you to have a look at. It's on the events dashboard. I think really sort of focusing on experience-led talent design, so driving sort of candidate, employee, manager experience, so important. And then also this piece around sort of scenario planning, workforce planning, how are we really sort of adaptable? So it's all about being data-led, AI-ready, and working across the entire sort of talent life cycle as one ecosystem. So finally, in summary, tomorrow's talent leaders need to bring the whole talent life cycle together. So as I said before, it's about being AI-ready, insight-led, really skilled at building capability, and really sort of trusted partners who help shape the future workforce. So that's sort of a whistle-stop tour of the talent trends and insights that we're seeing across the industry at the moment. I hope that has been useful to you. Do let me know if you have any questions. You should be able to access the report, and we can make sure that we share these slides with you too afterwards. Giles, any thoughts, comments?
So much. Alex, if you could close the slides, please, and then we could just sort of see Emma properly, because we've been shoved into the back. And there we go. Brilliant. Emma, I mean, overall, it's so much to unpack there. But I think it's really important to have a really solid grounding and an understanding of almost the global landscape at a more strategic level. So what's front of mind for C-suite right now? Because I think too often, and still unfortunately and frustratingly, sometimes recruitment is seen as sometimes at worst an admin function, but sometimes an operation function rather than one that actually adds value. And ultimately, it's bringing people into the organisation, which is the lifeblood. But I think if people are able to position themselves more strategically in terms of we understand what the priorities are, we understand what the pain points are, and this is how we're going to act as a true partner, and that's really going to help elevate recruiters just generally. And I think it's very clear here that the importance of EI in everybody's roles of creating and influencing relationships is something that AI simply can't replace, and this is something that we need to place all of our focus on. But all those arguments, the reasoning, the plans are all backed up by data as well. So a lot of what you've described within there are all things that we need to continue to harness and get even more confidence with. One of the things that we keep coming back to, again, I think is hiring managers. And overall, what the comments I'm going to make is that there's a lot there. It can be quite overwhelming, especially given that, again, TA's roles are evolving all the time. We're being asked to suddenly get our heads around even more tools. So we've now got to be data scientists. We've got to be proficient in not just using generative AI, but then looking at how we link that together and automate it. You made the reference, Emma, about sort of agentic AI. So actually linking these platforms together to achieve positive automation. There's so much to think about. And this is where Emma and the Talent Labs really come to the fore. It's an incredible community organisation that we are really proud to have been associated with for a long time, but they are there to act as sometimes a shoulder to cry on, but a community where people can really share their common experiences and get solutions to the problems they need, but also provide a wealth of resources online, but also practical training as well. Keep coming back to hiring managers. I know hiring managers think, Emma, isn't it your most popular training that you offer and deliver to your customers and your membership?
Yeah. at the moment, hiring manager training is sort of off the scale in terms of popularity, and I think that is very much sort of linked to the new legislation coming through. And I think the challenge for a lot of talent teams is that absolutely you do have the capability to deliver the training yourself, but you just don't have the time. And so we partner with many teams delivering training, whether that's e-learning or in person or virtual.
Yeah, so ultimately, I'm not sure how you managed to cover as much as you have. There's so much in there. And for everybody that's on the Crowdcast session, then you'll see various links through this chat to a lot of incredible resources. The annual report is one that I keep coming back to. It's really helpful from our business perspective. We talk to our customers, but it also is a bit of a guiding light so that we can understand and see where the priorities and where some of the pain points are. So we get a huge value from it. I would say that if you're interested in understanding, and again, to learn more about Talent Labs, about membership, about training, about accessing the incredible wealth of resources that are on there, I'm not going to say contact Emma because Emma's going on holiday, aren't you? You're off to Dubai.
Dubai on Saturday, yes, very exciting.
Amazing. So Emma's going to have a well-earned rest before she then gets thrown into the Talent Labs Awards, which is honestly one of my favourite nights of the whole year. It's incredible. We are so happy to be headline sponsors this year. But I put Anna, who is Emma's business partner, put Anna's email address in there. So you've got any questions at all, whatever it might be, Anna will be only too happy to field your questions. She might kill us for this now, stuck her email address in, but we've done it anyway. The recording will be available, Nikki. And what we'll do is we'll actually, the way that we work on these sessions, for those of you that are not familiar with them, we'll do a full blog post and the write-up. We'll include a link to this session as well. If any of you got any questions from a Jobtrain point of view, then by all means come to me or contact us directly. I'd be only too happy to help.
I'm happy, Giles, as well. If we can share the slides, and let's just share the slides so people can see my speaker notes, because that's got loads of loads of stats in the speaker notes so that people have access to those. I'm happy for that.
Really, that's amazing. So we'll make sure that there is also, we'll send out the slides to everybody that registered for this session. So for those of you that might have missed it, don't worry, we'll make sure you get all the information. And that's about it for today. As I said, from a Jobtrain point of view, we learned so much about some pain points around candidate experience. We're actually going to run a series of webinars all around the top level pain points and things over the next few months. So look out for those. And just to say, Emma, a huge thank you from me and everybody here for your time and all that wealth of information.
A whistle-stop tour. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a really good week and a really good, what is going to be a really hot and sunny bank holiday weekend for a change. So we're excited about that. So yeah, have a great week and see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.